The night was heavy with mist, the kind that swallowed sound and twisted shadows into forms that seemed almost alive. Lyra wrapped her cloak tightly around her shoulders, her heart beating faster with every step toward the castle perched atop the cliffs. She had never been here before, yet the pull had been impossible to resist. Her mother's whispered warnings echoed in her mind. The Alpha King is no ordinary man. He is bound by power and curse. Do not let him see fear. Yet fear clawed at her. Lyra had spent her entire life as an Omega, trained to listen, to obey, to hide her own strength beneath the mask of innocence. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, destiny had called her to the castle, and she could not turn away. The gates of the castle were enormous, black iron that gleamed under the pale light of the blood moon. No guard stood to welcome her. Instead, the silence itself seemed to watch her as she stepped forward. Each echo of her boots against the stone floor rang like a drumbeat, announcing her arrival. At the heart of the castle, in a hall lit by candles that cast dancing shadows across the walls, stood Kale, the Alpha King. His presence was more than commanding. It was consuming. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the effortless grace of someone born to lead, yet every motion carried an undercurrent of danger. His eyes, dark and unyielding, fixed on Lyra the instant she entered, and she felt as if they were peeling her apart, reading the very essence of her soul. "You are late," he said, his voice low but steady, a hint of something dangerous hidden beneath the calm. Lyra's stomach twisted. She had expected fear, yes, but his gaze made her feel fragile, like a bird trapped in a cage. She forced her voice out, steady, controlled. "I came as summoned, Your Grace." Kale stepped closer, each movement measured, deliberate. "Do you know why you were brought here?" Lyra shook her head. "Only that it concerns the blood moon and my family's legacy." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Legacy?" His voice was softer now, almost curious. "You speak of strength that has been hidden, but also of chains that have bound you. You have inherited more than your mother's warnings, little Omega." Lyra's heart leapt. How could he know about her visions? The dreams that had haunted her nights since childhood, showing the kingdom a flame and a man, powerful, terrifying, standing in the center. Before she could speak, the ground beneath them trembled. A strange wind spiraled through the hall, candles flickering violently, and the shadows along the walls seemed to stretch and twist toward them. Kale's eyes darkened, his hand curling into a fist. The air thickened, as if the castle itself were holding its breath. Lyra stepped back instinctively, her pulse racing. "Your Grace, what is happening?" Kale's jaw tightened. "The curse, it awakens." The word struck her like a cold blade. She had heard of the curse that plagued the Alpha King, whispered among the villages. A power so strong it could tear the soul from its body if left unchecked. It was said to grant dominance and fury beyond measure, yet it demanded control that few could sustain. And now, standing before him, Lyra realized she was witnessing the beginning of its storm. Kyle's body tensed, shadows crawling across the stone floor as if drawn to him. He moved faster than she could follow, reaching for a nearby ceremonial staff. Lyra froze, unsure whether to flee or act. Her instincts flared. Something inside her demanded she protect herself, that she meet the king's power with her own. "Step back, Omega," Kyle said, his voice a growl now, sharp and dangerous. "I will not harm you, but I cannot promise my restraint if provoked." Lyra's hand shook, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I am not afraid." The word seemed to slow him. Kyle's eyes flickered with surprise, a mixture of admiration and disbelief. He had expected fear, trembling, submission, But she had met his fury with courage. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the howling wind outside. Kyle's chest rose and fell rapidly, and the shadows around him writhed like living things. Then, without warning, his control slipped. A surge of power erupted from him, knocking Lyra backward. She screamed, not from pain, but from the sheer force of the energy that radiated from the Alpha. Yet, even as the power threatened to overwhelm her, something inside Lyra responded. She felt a pulse, a vibration deep in her bones that matched the rhythm of Kale's surge. She reached out instinctively, placing her hand in the invisible wave of his energy, and the effect was immediate. The surge faltered. Kale's eyes widened in shock. He had never felt anyone touch his power without being harmed. "You," he breathed, voice trembling, raw with emotion. "You are connected to it. Connected to me." Lyra's mind raced. She had always known her blood carried magic. But she had never understood the extent. The visions, the dreams, they were not just warnings. They were part of a bond she had yet to fully realize. Kale's chest heaved, his control slowly returning. He looked at her, not with anger now, but with something far more dangerous. Recognition. Recognition of a kindred spirit, of someone who could challenge his darkness, someone who could either save him or destroy him. The wind died down, leaving only the eerie quiet of the hall. Lyra straightened her shoulders, trying to catch her breath, her heart pounding like a drum. She had survived his loss of control, but the impact lingered, both physically and emotionally. She had glimpsed the storm within Kale, and it was far more terrifying and magnificent than she had ever imagined. Kale lowered his hand, his eyes softening slightly, though the intensity never faded. "You are not what I expected," he said quietly, "but perhaps you are exactly what I need." Lyra swallowed hard, her mind racing with questions, fear, and a strange, inexplicable pull toward the man who could have destroyed her. "What do you mean, Your Grace?" she asked, though part of her already understood. Before he could answer, a sudden crack of thunder shook the castle, and the blood moon reached its zenith, casting a crimson light through the tall windows. In that moment, Lyra's vision blurred, and she saw it. The kingdom engulfed in fire, Kyle standing at the center, her own hands stretched out toward him. They were both torn, split in half, not physically, but in spirit, bound by a fate neither fully controlled. Her scream echoed in the hall, blending with the wind outside. Kale's eyes followed hers, and for a moment the world seemed to hang in perfect suspension. The connection between them was undeniable, frightening, and intoxicating all at once. The castle, silent and watchful, seemed to pulse with the power that surged between them. Lyra knew this was only the beginning. The curse, the blood moon, the bond between Omega and Alpha, it had all awakened tonight, and nothing would ever be the same again. She met Kale's gaze, and in that moment, a single thought crystallized in her mind. I am part of this now. There is no turning back. The blood moon's light faded slowly, but its mark remained etched in her soul. The scream that had torn from her lips was not just of fear, it was a call, a warning, a promise. The storm had begun, and both the Alpha King and the Virgin Omega were caught in its first, terrifying swirl. Outside, the winds howled, carrying the echo of her scream across the cliffs. Inside, Kale's chest heaved with power barely restrained, and he realized with a shiver that Lyra was no ordinary Omega. She was the key to his curse, and perhaps the only one who could save him from himself. And in that quiet, electric moment, both knew the same truth. The blood moon had awakened more than magic. It had awakened destiny. The castle had never felt so alive, yet so heavy. Every shadow seemed to move with intent. Every whisper of wind carried a warning. Lyra walked through the grand corridors with measured steps, her mind still trembling from the blood moon's awakening the night before. She could still feel Kale's power lingering in the air, a presence that pressed against her skin, tugging at her heart, demanding attention. Kale had not spoken much since the incident. He had retreated to the upper towers, leaving Lyra to wander the halls as she tried to understand her own connection to him. Every doorway seemed to carry a secret, every tapestry a history of the kingdom and its rulers. Lyra's hands brushed against the carved stones, and she could feel the echoes of magic within the castle walls. The bond between her and Kale was impossible to ignore. Every time she closed her eyes, she could feel the pulse of his power, strong, dangerous, yet strangely comforting. She wondered if he felt the same pull, the same thread that connected them like two halves of a single force. Later, she found herself in the castle's forbidden library, a hall so vast that the ceiling disappeared into shadows. Ancient tomes lined every wall, and the air smelled of old parchment and dust. Lyra had been warned never to enter here alone, but curiosity had a stronger grip tonight than caution. She pulled open a heavy book, its cover etched with symbols that seemed to move under her gaze. Inside, she discovered accounts of the blood moon, of alpha kings and omegas bound by fate, of curses so old that they had been nearly forgotten. One line made her pause. Only an omega with a heart of courage and blood of the line can temper the alpha's darkness. Together they may find salvation or destruction. Lyra's breath caught. That was her. That had to be her. She wasn't sure if she should feel fear or hope, perhaps both. A sudden sound made her spin around. Kyle stood at the doorway, his dark silhouette framed by the crimson glow of the blood moon through the windows. Even in the dim light, she could see the intensity in his eyes, the tension coiled in every muscle. "You should not be here," he said, his voice low, but the edges were softer than before, almost inviting. Lyra straightened. "I need to understand. I need to know why I can feel what I felt last night." Kyle stepped into the library, his movements fluid and purposeful. "You felt my power," he said simply, "and it felt you. That is dangerous, Omega." Lyra's pulse quickened. "Then why am I not afraid?" Kale's lips tightened. "Because you are different. Most would crumble under my presence. You challenge me, even when you do not intend to. That is why the curse stirs within me more violently when you are near." Lyra's hands trembled, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "If I am the key to your curse, then I will help you." Kyle's expression shifted. There was surprise, yes, but also a shadow of doubt. "Help me? You do not understand what that means. If you fail, if your courage falters even once, the darkness will consume more than me. It could consume you." Lyra swallowed hard. "I do not fear it." The words seemed to hang in the air, and for a moment, Kyle simply looked at her, searching her face as though trying to read the depths of her soul. He saw not just courage, but fire, determination, and something he had not expected, a strange comfort in her presence. It unsettled him, and yet it drew him closer. The castle trembled once more, a subtle vibration that ran through the floors and walls. Shadows shifted and twisted, and Kale's eyes darkened instantly. The curse had sensed her presence again. The thread between them resonating, growing stronger. "Stay close," he said abruptly. "Do not leave my side." Lyra nodded, though her mind raced. "Why? What is coming?" Kyle's jaw tightened. "The blood moon's power is not yet spent. The more you connect to me, the more the curse will awaken. And once it does, restraint may not be possible." For the next hours, Kyle led her through the castle, teaching her to sense the flow of magic, to feel the rhythm of his power without fear. Every step brought them closer, not just in proximity, but in understanding. Lyra began to see the man behind the Alpha, a ruler, bound by duty, by fear, and by centuries of a curse that had made him both feared and lonely. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked quietly, as they stopped in the upper tower overlooking the forest. "The pull between us?" "You cannot deny it." Lyra's cheeks flushed. "I cannot," she admitted. "It is frightening, but also compelling." Cale's hand hovered near hers, a dangerous tension in the air. He was struggling, she could see it, struggling with his instincts, his power, and the desire that surged every time he was near her. But there was also something else, restraint, the desire to control the darkness within him, to protect rather than dominate. A sudden roar shattered the quiet. From the forest below, the rival lord's forces advanced toward the castle. Cale's eyes flared with power, his body tensing for battle. "You must stay back," he ordered, his voice a mix of command and plea. "If I lose control, you could be hurt." Lyra shook her head. "No, I can help. I can—" Cale's gaze softened, then hardened. "You are stronger than you realize. But do not test me. Not yet." The battle began before they could speak further. Cale moved like a storm incarnate, his power tearing through the enemy ranks, shadows stretching and striking like living blades. Lyra watched, fear and awe warring within her. She realized that he was terrifying and magnificent. When an enemy soldier approached her unexpectedly, Lyra felt the energy within her awaken once more. Without thinking, she reached out instinctively. A surge of power emanated from her, creating a shield that threw the soldier backward. Kyle turned at the sound, his eyes locking on her, wide with shock. You did that," he said, disbelief and awe mingled in his voice. "You are not just my Omega. You are part of this, part of the power itself." Lyra trembled, her heart pounding. "I didn't mean, I just—" Kyle closed the distance between them, his hand gently brushing against hers. "No," he said firmly. "You meant exactly that, and in doing so, you saved yourself. And me." The enemy retreating, Cale and Lyra stood together in the quiet aftermath. The castle walls seemed to breathe with relief, but the storm between them was far from over. Every glance, every touch, carried the weight of something deeper: trust, fear, attraction, and the relentless pull of destiny. Lyra's eyes met Cale's. "I feel it," she whispered. "The connection, the thread between us. But I do not understand it fully." Cale's expression softened, though the tension never left his eyes. "You will, and when you do, we must be ready. The curse will not wait for understanding. It will strike, and when it does, we will either stand together or fall apart." The blood moon had not yet faded. Its light still painted the castle halls in shades of crimson and shadow. Lyra felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the realization that the danger was only beginning. Cale's power, her own awakening strength, and the threads of destiny connecting them could ignite or destroy the kingdom. And as they stood together, the wind outside carrying whispers of power and ruin, Lyra felt it deep in her bones. The next night under the blood moon would demand more than courage. It would demand trust. It would demand sacrifice. And it would demand that the Virgin Omega and the Alpha King face the darkness within themselves, together. Cliffhanger. As the crimson light flickered across the towers, Cale's hand brushed against Lyra's again, and for a brief heartbeat, the world fell silent. Then, with a growl of frustration and fear, Cale's control slipped. Shadows surged around him, reaching for Lyra, threatening to engulf them both. She screamed, not from pain, but from the raw, terrifying pull of their combined power. And in that scream, she realized the truth. The curse was growing stronger, and next time, they might not survive it together. The night air was sharp and cold as Lyra stood on the castle balcony, gazing at the forest that stretched endlessly beneath them. The blood moon hung low in the sky, casting a deep red glow over the trees and the cliffs beyond. Every shadow seemed to twist and breathe, carrying whispers that spoke of danger and power. Lyra shivered, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that Cale's darkness had grown stronger since the last moon. Cale appeared behind her, silent as a shadow, his presence filling the balcony with an almost unbearable intensity. He didn't touch her, yet she could feel the heat of his body, the raw power coiling like a spring ready to snap. "You feel it too, don't you?" Lyra whispered. Cale's gaze swept over the forest, then returned to her, sharp and unyielding. "Yes," he admitted. "The curse grows. With every blood moon it tests me, tempts me, pushes me toward a darkness I fear I cannot resist." Lyra turned to face him fully, her heart pounding. "Then let me help you. I can't control your power, but I can be here with you. I can—" Cale shook his head. "It is not that simple. If I lose control tonight, you could be consumed. I cannot allow that." Lyra stepped closer, undeterred. "I am not afraid. Not of you. Not of the curse. I can feel your power, and it calls to something in me. I do not know what it is, but I know I can face it." Kyle's eyes darkened, torn between desire and fear. His body tensed, the shadows around him twisting as if drawn to the storm inside him. For a moment, he seemed on the verge of speaking, but instead, he turned sharply and strode toward the castle's inner halls. Lyra hurried to follow. The halls were silent, but the air was electric. Every flicker of torchlight made shadows leap like living things. Cale led her to the training chambers, vast rooms where the echoes of past warriors still seemed to linger. He stopped in the center, turning to face her. "You must understand something," he said quietly. "The curse is more than strength or fury. It feeds on fear, on doubt, on resistance. If you falter, if even for a second you hesitate, it will use me against you." Lyra's hands clenched. "Then I won't falter. I will face it with you." Kyle studied her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, but know this. Tonight will not be easy. The curse will tempt me. It will push me to extremes. And you will be tested as well." He stepped closer, so close that Lyra could feel the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Her own pulse quickened. She had always known the Alpha King was powerful, but being near him like this, so close, so real, made her feel both terrified and alive. The first test came swiftly. A shadow surged across the chamber floor, a creature born from the curse itself. Kyle moved like a storm, his power ripping through the darkness, yet the creature seemed endless, its forms multiplying with every strike. Lyra felt a surge of energy within her, a rhythm that matched Cale's. She reached out instinctively, and a shield of light erupted from her hands, pushing back the shadows. Cale's eyes widened. You are part of this, truly, not just my Omega, but part of the power itself." Lyra's breath came in short gasps. "I don't know how. I felt you. I felt the curse's pull, and I reacted." Kyle studied her, awe and fear mingled in his gaze. "You are stronger than I imagined, stronger than anyone I have ever known." The shadows retreated for a moment, but the threat was far from over. They reformed, swirling faster, more violent. Cale's body tensed, the dark energy inside him rising uncontrollably. His eyes flared with crimson light, and for the first time since their bond had awakened, he lost control. Lyra screamed, not in fear, but instinctively, as the energy surged toward them both. She felt herself split in two, not physically but spiritually, her mind and soul pulled toward the darkness within Cale. For a terrifying moment, it seemed as if the curse would consume her as well. Cale's roar shook the chamber, but in that instant, he reached out for her. His hand grasped hers, and the connection sparked a wave of power that pushed back the shadows. Lyra felt a strange harmony between them, a balance that neither had expected. The darkness recoiled, as if sensing that its prey had found a bond it could not sever. When the energy faded, the chamber was quiet. Cale's chest heaved, his body trembling, and Lyra collapsed to her knees, drained but unharmed. He knelt beside her, his hands brushing her hair back from her face. "You are extraordinary," he murmured. "I thought I would destroy you, and yet you saved yourself and me." Lyra looked up at him, her own heart racing. "We saved each other." Cale's eyes softened, but the tension remained. He was still dangerous, still bound by the curse, still the Alpha King who could lose himself at any moment. But now he also seemed vulnerable, human in a way he had never allowed anyone to see. For hours, they trained in silence, learning to sense each other's power, to move as one. Every touch, every glance, carried the weight of trust, fear, and something deeper. Something neither of them could name, but both felt. Later, as the blood moon hung low and red in the sky, Cale led Lyra to the castle's cliffs. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, and the wind carried whispers of the unknown. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded. "I do. The pull between us, the thread that binds us, it is stronger than anything I have ever felt." Cale stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. "And yet it terrifies me, because the closer we grow, the harder it becomes to control the curse. And when the curse is uncontrolled, it will tear everything apart." Lyra took a deep breath, summoning all her courage. "Then we face it together. I will not let it destroy you or me. Not if we are together." Cale's eyes searched hers, dark and fierce, yet tinged with something softer. He wanted to pull her close, to let the bond deepen, but he also feared what it would unleash. Every instinct screamed at him to keep control, to protect her by keeping her at a distance, and yet he could not. He could not resist the pull, the connection, the dangerous thread that bound them. Suddenly, a roar echoed from the forest below. A rival force had gathered, intent on testing the Alpha King, unaware that the true battle was not with swords or shields, but with the curse itself. Cale's eyes flared with power, shadows rising around him. Lyra felt the energy surge once more, matching his rhythm, her own power flaring in response. They were two halves of a single force, bound by destiny, bound by blood, bound by something far stronger than fear. But the power was volatile, dangerous. Kyle's control faltered again, and Lyra realized with a shiver that their bond, strong as it was, could not fully contain the curse. For the first time, she understood the true cost of their connection. It demanded trust, courage, and a willingness to face the darkness together. Cale's voice broke through her thoughts, low and raw. "Do you trust me, Lyra?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "With everything." A shadow surged closer, and the night erupted into chaos. Lyra felt herself split in two again, drawn toward the darkness within Cale, yet held by the connection that bound them. She screamed, not in fear, but in defiance, in determination. Together they could face it, or together they could fall. The blood moon cast its crimson light across the cliffs, the castle, and the forest below. It was beautiful, terrifying and relentless, a reflection of the bond between the Alpha King and the Virgin Omega, and as the wind howled around them, Lyra realized the truth. Their journey was only beginning, and the next night under the blood moon would demand everything they had, and more. Cliffhanger. As the shadows swirled and the curse's energy pressed against them, Kale's control slipped again, and Lyra felt herself drawn toward him in a way she could not resist. Their hands touched, the connection sparking a wave of power that neither fully understood. The blood moon rose higher, and a whisper of destiny brushed against Lyra's ear. "You are bound to me, and the darkness will demand its price." The night was heavier than ever. The blood moon hung low and swollen in the sky, casting its crimson glow over the castle and the cliffs beyond. Shadows seemed to writhe and twist, carrying whispers that only Lyra could feel. Her heart raced, yet a strange calm had settled over her, a calm born of understanding, of purpose, and of the bond she shared with Kyle. Kyle stood beside her on the cliff's edge, the wind whipping through his dark hair. His eyes, usually so fierce and unreadable, were softer tonight, but even so they carried the weight of the curse that had haunted him for centuries. The shadows around him stirred, alive and hungry, as if sensing the final test approaching. "Tonight," Kale said, his voice low and rough, "the curse will push me beyond the edge. I may not be able to control it. You must be ready, Lyra. You must face it with me, or you will be destroyed." Lyra took a deep breath, letting the wind fill her lungs. "I am ready," she whispered. "I do not fear it. Not if I am with you." Kyle studied her, his hand brushing against hers for a fleeting moment, grounding them both. "Then stay close. Trust me, as I trust you." Below them, the forest stirred. Shadows twisted into forms that were both familiar and alien, creatures born of Kyle's curse. They moved with purpose, testing, probing, challenging. Lyra could feel the pulse of the magic, the rhythm of Kale's power, and it called to her in ways she had never imagined. She stepped forward, letting the connection flow, allowing her own power to intertwine with his. The first shadow lunged, and Kale's power erupted. Energy surged from him like a living storm, dark and crimson. Lyra felt herself drawn into the wave, her own energy responding instinctively, forming a shield that not only protected her but strengthened Kale. The creature recoiled, hissing but did not retreat. Kale's hand found hers, and in that touch, their power surged together. He could feel her courage, her strength, her willingness to face the darkness with him. It was more than a bond. It was unity, a merging of wills that neither had expected, but both had needed. "You are extraordinary," Kale said, breathless, his crimson eyes flickering with shadow and light. "I feared the curse would consume you, but instead, you amplify me. You make me whole." Lyra's chest heaved, fear and determination warring within her. "We are stronger together," she said. "The curse may test us, but it cannot break what we share." The shadows advanced again, more numerous this time, each one a fragment of Kale's darkness. They swirled around him, clawing at his control, whispering lies and threats that could shake even the strongest soul. Kale gritted his teeth, fighting to hold himself together. But the strain was visible in the trembling of his hands and the tightening of his jaw. Lyra stepped closer, her hand still in his. "Feel me," she said. "Let my power flow with yours. Trust it. Trust me." Kale closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink into him. He felt the thread of connection tighten, stronger than it had ever been. Slowly, carefully, he allowed himself to release some of the burden, letting her share in the energy that had almost destroyed him before. Together, they formed a barrier of light and shadow, a harmony that neither the curse nor the creatures could penetrate. The creatures faltered, shrieking as their attack was repelled by a force they could not understand. Kyle's power surged again, but this time it was tempered, controlled, not by fear, not by restraint alone, but by trust and unity with Lyra. For the first time, Cale allowed himself to breathe. He looked at Lyra, truly looked at her, and saw not just an Omega, not just a savior, but the part of him that had been missing for centuries. She was his equal, his partner, the only one who could stand beside him and not be consumed. You have saved me," he said quietly, his voice almost breaking. "And in doing so, you have saved yourself." Lyra shook her head, a small smile on her lips despite the exhaustion. "We saved each other," she said. "The curse could not break us, because we chose to face it together." The shadows began to dissipate, retreating into the forest, defeated by a power they had not anticipated. The blood moon's light faded slightly, leaving the castle bathed in a softer crimson glow. Lyra and Cale stood on the cliff, side by side, hands still intertwined, their breaths mingling in the cold night air. Cale's eyes softened further, the tension in his body easing. "I have been alone for centuries," he said, "haunted by the curse, by power, by everything I could not control. And now, you are here. You have given me something I thought I could never have. Hope." Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and power beyond comprehension, and she had not faltered. "We still have a long road ahead," she said. "The curse may be weakened, but it is not gone, and the kingdom, it still needs protection." Kyle nodded, determination returning to his features. "Then we face it together. No more distance, no more hesitation. From this night forward, we are bound, not by fear or curse, but by choice and by trust." They descended from the cliff together, returning to the castle, each step heavy with purpose. The halls no longer seemed dark or threatening. The castle itself seemed to recognize the change. The shadows now moved gently, almost respectfully, as if acknowledging the bond between the Alpha King and his Omega. In the main hall, Cale stopped and turned to Lyra. "There is one final thing you must understand," he said, his voice low and serious. "The curse is not entirely gone. It will always be a part of me, a part of us. But now, it is tempered by what we share, by trust, by courage, and by choice." Lyra met his gaze. "Then I will choose. Every day, I will face it with you, and I will not falter." Cale's lips curved into a small, rare smile. "Then we are ready." The blood moon's final glow bathed the castle in crimson as they stood together, hands intertwined, hearts synchronized. They had faced the darkness, the curse, the shadows of the past, and they had emerged stronger, unified, and transformed. The bond between them was no longer one of fear or dominance, but of mutual respect, trust, and love. The night deepened, and with it came a sense of peace, a fragile, beautiful peace that had been impossible before. Lyra rested her head against Cale's shoulder, and for the first time, the Alpha King allowed himself to relax completely. He was no longer just a ruler, no longer just a warrior bound by a curse. He was whole, not because the curse had ended, but because he had found someone who could walk beside him through the storm. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying promises of challenges yet to come. But Cale and Lyra stood together, unbroken, unafraid. The blood moon had tested them, had threatened to split them in half, and yet they had endured, stronger than before. Kyle pressed a gentle kiss to Lyra's forehead, a silent promise. "No matter what comes," he said, "we face it together." Lyra smiled, her eyes shining with determination and warmth. "Together," she echoed. The castle seemed to sigh, shadows retreating to the corners, the wind softening. And for a moment, the world felt still, as if it recognized the bond forged between the Alpha King and his Omega. a bond stronger than curse, stronger than fear, stronger than destiny itself. Yet, even in that moment of peace, both Cale and Lyra knew the truth. The world beyond the castle walls was vast, dangerous, and full of challenges. The curse, though weakened, was never truly gone. But they had faced its edge, had stared into the darkness, and had chosen each other. That choice, that bond, would guide them through whatever trials awaited. And as the first light of dawn crept over the cliffs, painting the forest in gold, Cale and Lyra stood side by side, hands clasped, hearts aligned. They were no longer just Alpha and Omega. They were partners, equals, and a force united against the darkness of the world and the darkness within themselves. The blood moon faded behind them, leaving only its memory and the promise of the bond that could not be broken.